Icarus is a superior that everyone fears and respects. In my previous life, I loved Icarus deeply, yet also hated him intensely. I gave birth to a son for him and took care of everything for him. But he never cared about me. He humiliated me and ignored me time and time again. I lived a lonely and bitter life and finally died in depression. In this new life, I decided to leave. In this lifetime, I will no longer love him. But he panicked. When we met again, his eyes were full of desperation. And he begged me to come back over and over again. I smiled with relief and shook my head. But I've already fallen in love with someone else and will get married soon. In 1982. In the compound for family members. Nala, how many times have I told you that Eris is just here to help us? Why do you keep picking on her? Nala looked up and met Icarus's cold gaze. Looking at the face that she had been infatuated with for a long time in her previous life, she was suddenly stunned and finally realized that she had been reborn. In her previous life, she had worked hard for Icarus for half of her life and finally ended up with a bad reputation. After marriage, Icarus didn't love her, and they had little to say to each other. Until finally, during a mission, she died a tragic death, and the two of them didn't say a word to each other. Thinking of this, she clenched her fists. But just as she was about to speak, she was interrupted by the person on the bed. Icarus. I'm okay. She didn't do it on purpose. Nala just lost her grip for a moment. My hand is burned very badly and won't get better for a while. I might need you, Icarus, had in so still wide say, to take care of me more. Eris had a pained expression on her face. There were 2 lines of tears on her small face. And there were several large blisters on her forearm. In the sunlight, it looked even more terrifying. There was a hint of copiousness in her voice. With this appearance of hers, not to mention Icarus, even Nala herself would be moved by it. Nala remembered that she had been reborn on the day when Eris framed her. In her previous life, it was today that the first cracks appeared in her relationship with Icarus. 2 hours ago, Eris invited her to the kitchen to taste the dishes. But as soon as Nala arrived, Eris pushed her into the corner. Nala watched helplessly as Eris splashed the hot dish on her own arm. After that, Eris shifted all the blame onto her, so that everyone thought that Nala had burned Eris on purpose. Before Nala could speak, a powerful force pulled her to the side. Icarus gave her a cold look. Then he immediately comforted Eris. And his voice became a bit warmer. Definitely. You don't have to do any kitchen work for the next few days. Leave it all to Nala. She should take responsibility for her actions. You have delicate skin and haven't suffered since you were a child. Since you're here this time, I will definitely take you out more often. Eris looked shy. Thank you, brother. It's okay. This is what I should do. You're injured and you're a girl, so I should take care of you. Icarus had a gentle expression. But when he turned to Nala, he resumed his cold look. His brows were furrowed, and his voice was deep. I won't be going home for a few days. I'll stay here to take care of Eris. Take care? What nonsense. Nala sneered in her heart. There were so many people in the camp. Anyone could take care of Eris. Why did it have to be this married man? He just wanted to be with her. That's all. His first love was burned. And he must be extremely heartbroken. Remembering that in her previous life, she had worked hard for half of her life and gave birth to a child for him. No matter what, he had never felt sorry for her. Sure enough, Nala hooked the corners of her lips and nodded slightly. Without the hysteria of the past, she responded and turned away. Okay. The moment she walked out of the compound for family members, she secretly made up her mind. In her previous life, in order to be with him, she gave up her dream. She didn't go to teach in a remote area but stayed in the team with him conscientiously. But in this life, she wouldn't be so stupid anymore. She walked to the public telephone booth and dialed the phone. Director Yang. I've decided to go to Xinjiang to teach as a volunteer. On the other end of the phone, Director Liang paused, but, are you really sure? Once you go to Xinjiang, it's a long journey. Are you really willing to give up everything you have now? The autumn wind was rustling. Nala stood up straight. After a while, her words were firm. Xinjiang is my hometown. I'm willing to go back and teach as a volunteer and help build my hometown together. Director Liang nodded. Okay. Good girl. I'll be waiting for you. After hanging up the phone, Nala took a deep breath, as if the burden in her heart had been completely lifted. It was early autumn, and the sky was blue. In this life, she must take a different path. It was already 3 o'clock in the afternoon when she returned to the compound for family members. Her task today was to cook for everyone in the compound and also to count the expenses here for Icarus. Thinking of this, she put on her clothes and quickened her pace. Along the way, many people greeted her. Nala, why are you coming to the kitchen again today? Are you going to add some special dishes for our superior? Nala, you can't just cook for the superior every day and not for us. Your cooking is so delicious. When will you give us a treat? Nala carried the vegetables in her hand and walked towards the room while answering. No. I'm on duty in the kitchen today. And I'll let you taste my cooking skills today. There was a cheer around her. Icarus couldn't get used to the food in the team. So, in her previous life, she had specially learned how to cook for Icarus and even went back to Icarus's hometown to learn cooking skills from his mother. All for him to be able to taste the flavor of his hometown in the team. Thinking of this, her heart couldn't help but feel a little sour. The relationship she had treated so seriously. In the end, it ended in complete failure. She hooked the corners of her lips, picked up a knife, and started peeling the vegetables. It was only then that she realized that there was no one in the kitchen. The kitchen was eerily quiet. Those who used to help with the preparations were all gone. Just as she was wondering, Ally slipped in from the door. What's wrong? Ally? Where are the people in the kitchen? Ally stammered, Sister. I'm telling you. Don't be sad. The superior said that you're too jealous. To punish you, hadn't förställd my ancestor. He won't allow anyone to help you. So, the people who used to help in the kitchen have all been driven away by the superior. I sneaked back. Nala felt a chill in her heart. Punish her? But she had never been wrong. It was clearly Eris who burned herself, and now everything was being blamed on her. She was jealous? Why were all the mistakes hers? But now, she didn't want to argue about anything anymore. After getting through these few days, she would leave. She pushed Ally and shook her head. It's okay. Since he doesn't want you to come, you should leave too. I don't want to implicate others. I can manage on my own. Since Sister Nala said so, Ally didn't dare to disobey. She just felt sorry for her sister. She knew that Sister Nala wasn't that kind of person. How sad Sister Nala must be that the superior treated her like this. Ally hesitated and then left the room, taking the kitchen garbage with her when she left. Nala peeled the vegetables and cooked the dishes all by herself. She couldn't handle everything alone. And when she was cooking, a large blister formed on her hand from the hot oil. Nala didn't have time to take care of it and immediately poured the vegetables into the pot. She kept working without a break for 3 hours. And finally, the dishes were cooked. Fortunately, having fulfilled my sigh, she had come early today. And for the team, it wasn't too late for the meal. Sister, the dishes you cooked are really delicious. No wonder the superior likes them. I have to say, the superior really found a good wife. If I had a wife like Sister Nala, I'd consider myself very lucky. Yeah, yeah. Sister Nala doesn't like to dress up. Otherwise, with her figure, she could be a big star anywhere. Everyone praised her one after another and gave their compliments. Seeing that her comrades were enjoying their meals happily, a warm current flowed through Nala's heart. She looked up, and just then, she saw 2 people, one tall and one short, walking over arm in arm in the distance. A hint of sadness flashed through Nala's eyes without being noticed. Those 2 people were none other than Eris and Icarus. Hearing their discussion, Icarus also joined in. You'd consider yourself lucky if you had her? She just causes me trouble every day. If it weren't for her, could Eris have been burned like this? The 2 of them slowly approached. Eris nestled in Icarus's arms, with a slightly aggrieved look on her small face. It's okay. It's okay. Icarus, I came to find you. So it's inevitable that Sister Nala would be angry. It's just a burn. It doesn't matter. When everyone heard this, They fell silent and continued eating their food. Nala. This is a lesson for you today. If you dare to cause trouble for Eris again in the future, I won't let you off easily. His words were harsh. And he was showing off his power. Nala could no longer find even a trace of love in his eyes. She hooked the corners of her lips, sat down, and started eating on her own without looking up again. Throughout the meal, Eris leaned against Icarus's arms and called out cautiously, "Icarus, my hand hurts. And I can't pick up the food." And Icarus also picked up the food for her with a doting look on his face, not getting tired of it at all. After Nala finished eating quickly, she took her things and left the dining table. There were fixed people to clean up the bowls and plates every day, so she could leave early. But on the way, she found that she had left her coat on her seat. When she went back, she heard the gossip at the table. "Wow. Bro. Are you going to change your woman? Are you going to dump Sister Nala? It doesn't matter. Even if Sister Nala is good, she doesn't know how to dress up. How can she be worthy of your handsome face? I have to say, Sister Eris and you are a perfect match made in heaven. TSK, having so felwed session. TSK, TSK, TSK. Who doesn't know that our Icarus was madly in love with Sister Eris when he was young?" Everyone was chatting and gossiping. Eris also responded with a shy look on her face, "Don't talk nonsense." These people were always like this, flattering whoever they were talking about. Nala didn't blame them. But Icarus didn't deny a single word. He just sat on the chair like that, allowing others to guess and discuss. In this way, hadn't fulfilled my obsession. He should have acquiesced. That's okay. Since he didn't like her, she could leave more freely. Nala pushed the door open. And everyone immediately fell silent and smiled awkwardly. "Sister, when did you come? You didn't hear what we were saying, did you?" Everyone stammered. But Nala was very open-minded. She smiled and waved her hand. "You're right. What's the big deal? To be honest, it's not against the law." As she said this, she even made a naughty gesture. But this appearance of hers didn't feel right to Icarus. Why had she become so reasonable now? Even when she heard others say such things, she didn't react. Wasn't this exactly what he wanted? But now, why did he feel so uncomfortable in his heart? It was already 9 o'clock in the evening when she returned to the family compound. After a tiring day, Nala fell asleep in her clothes. But she just couldn't fall asleep no matter what. She said she didn't care. But the scenes from today kept replaying in her mind. Icarus's cold eyes. And the affectionate scenes between them. It was as if Nala was drawn into an abyss. And her heart grew colder inch by inch. It made her realize that all these years between her and Icarus had been nothing but a joke. At the age of 18, she was sent to the team to teach and met Icarus. They fell in love at first sight. And Icarus pursued her frantically. The young girl was sensitive and just beginning to experience the stirrings of love. As time passed, she was also indulged in Icarus's handsome appearance. She began to like the way Icarus smiled at her and started to observe his every move obsessively. In her dreams at midnight, all she saw was his handsome face. That year, he took the initiative to ask her father for her hand in marriage. And Nala was so happy that she couldn't fall asleep for 3 days. Later, everything changed when Eris was sent here by the higher-ups. Eris was the medical staff in the team and often took care of Icarus. The two of them exchanged flirtatious glances. At that time, Nala realized that everything had been premeditated. According to the legend, the first love that Icarus couldn't forget in his heart was exactly Eris. Since then, the relationship between her and Icarus had also become like a stagnant pool of water. Frighteningly plain. Nala took a deep breath and stared at the dark ceiling alone. She didn't know whether it was her heart or her body that was cold. And she curled up tightly. Her waist was terribly sore and swollen. The ticking sound of the clock reached her eardrums. She didn't manage to fall asleep until it was getting dawn. She was woken up by the sound of Icarus entering the door. Icarus rushed in from outside the door. In a hurry. When he saw her, he stopped in his tracks. For a long while, their eyes met. Icarus dodged awkwardly. "Don't believe what was said yesterday. They were just talking nonsense. Don't take it to heart. Icarus's hair was still a bit messy, and the buttons of his shirt were fast and in a disorderly manner. Perhaps he was busy taking care of Eris when he got up this morning and forgot everything else. Thinking like this, Nala nodded, and a trace of doubt flashed in her eyes. You came so early just to tell me this? I wanted to come back last night, but Eris said she was afraid of the dark, so I didn't come back. Nala smiled. She always felt that his excuse was too clumsy. Afraid of the dark? Did he think she was a child and would believe such an excuse? Nala's gaze fell on a red mark on Icarus's neck and then gently moved away. His hand was injured, but it didn't seem to delay other things. She sneered. It's okay. You don't need to come back. I'm not afraid of the dark. Eris's hand won't get better anytime soon. You'd better take care of her more. You don't need to come back recently. Nala yawned and glanced at him inferently. All right. If you're not angry, go and apologize to Eris. She was afraid that you would be sad if you heard about it, and she cried all night last night. So that's why he came back so early today. Was it to ask her to apologize to Eris? Nala got up from the bed and replied inferently. Okay. After thinking about it all night. She was now very calm. When she went out, Icarus saw the wound on her hand, and his eyes froze for a moment. You're injured? It's okay. If you had been this obedient before, we wouldn't have quarreled so much. As long as you don't cause trouble for Eris in the future, I won't lose my temper with you either. Nala smiled and didn't say anything more. The future? There wouldn't be a future for them anymore. She had already decided to leave and never come back. Nala opened the jeep and sat in the back seat. In the past, when they were deeply in love, Icarus always liked to hold her hand with one hand while driving and said that he couldn't calm down if she didn't sit in the copilot seat. For this reason, every time Icarus went on a business trip, Nala would hang a knitted pendant in the copilot seat as a gift for Icarus, pretending that she was accompanying him. Now, the pendant in the copilot seat had been cleaned up completely. Instead, there was a faint fragrance of women's perfume filling the entire jeep. It was the smell of Eris. They were silent all the way. Nala's phone rang, and she answered the call. Lila, remember to bring your teaching support materials. It's possible that your files need to be transferred to Xinjiang. The voice came from the receiver. Okay. Director Yang. Don't worry. Icarus in the driver's seat held his breath and turned to look at Nala. Xinjiang? Are you going to Xinjiang? No. They need my files from my hometown. So I'm going to send them back. Nala didn't want to say more and didn't want to tell him the fact that she was leaving. She just perfunctorily replied a few words. Fortunately, heading to Felbley. Icarus didn't suspect anything. Hearing her say this, Icarus's flustered heart calmed down a bit. The two of them arrived at the hospital one after the other. When Eris saw them coming in, she jumped down from the bed, hugged Icarus, and acted cockathiously. I couldn't see you when I woke up. So you went to find Sister Nala. I knew it. You didn't really want to take care of me. Otherwise. I'm hungry now. Why did you run away? As she said this, she actually hugged Icarus and pouted her lips, trying to kiss him. Icarus awkwardly dodged, but his face turned red, and he stammered. You said you were afraid that Nala would think too much and couldn't fall asleep all night. I asked Nala to come and apologize to you. Only then did Eris seem to remember something and nodded quickly. She cried so pitifully. Sister Nala, you don't know. I was worried about you last night. I was afraid that you would be sad. Those people are really something. Although Icarus loved me passionately that year, they shouldn't have said it out loud. While they were chatting, Icarus went out. I'll go and buy you something to eat. As soon as Icarus's back disappeared behind the door, Eris immediately changed her words. She pulled down her camisolo, and the softness of her chest was faintly visible, with a few red marks that were very alluring. I cried so much yesterday that Icarus couldn't help making love to me again and again. He never treats you like this. Right? He has always loved me. And he will love me in the future too. Stop being shameless and pestering Icarus. Do you know what people in the team say about you? They say you're cheap. That you're breaking up lovers. Icarus and I have been together for so many years. What right do you have to interfere? Before Eris could finish speaking, Nala said inferiorly. I don't want to compete with you for him. And I won't pester him. Don't worry. I'm leaving soon. I'm going back to Xinjiang to teach. I wish you a long and happy marriage. Icarus had just entered the door behind her. When he heard someone mention going to Xinjiang, he asked subconsciously. What teaching in Xinjiang? Icarus frowned and asked. Who's going to Xinjiang to teach? Before he could finish speaking, Eris interrupted him. She was still in that delicate and soft manner and fell into Icarus's arms crookedly. Icarus. It hurts so much. My arm hurts again. The next second, Icarus threw what he had just heard out of his mind and took care of Eris wholeheartedly. He patiently blew on the food to cool it down and then fed it to her spoonful by spoonful. Even though Eris always acted cockathiously about this, Icarus endured it. Nala snorted and her eyes were full of mockery. After being in love for so many years, Icarus had rarely been so gentle with her. She had originally thought that Icarus was just naturally cold in character. Unexpectedly, it was just towards her. If he loved Eris so much, why did he propose to her father that year? If they were so close, why did they have to hurt her feelings? She must have been crazy in her previous life to have devoted herself to him. Thinking like this, she left the room without looking back. For several days in a row, Icarus didn't come back. Nala didn't care much either. She just devoted herself wholeheartedly to the study content for teaching support. In recent years, because of Icarus, she had slacked off in her studies a lot, and she wanted to gradually pick up that knowledge again. Not only that, but she also dressed herself up beautifully just like when she was young. In the past, she only knew how to save money to buy nice things for Icarus. But she had forgotten about herself. In the mirror, she had red lips, white teeth, clear eyebrows, and beautiful eyes. Her skin was tender and rosy, and she was a proper beauty. Until Icarus called. Nala, today is Eris's birthday. Come over. It's by the shore. She's far away from home and doesn't have many relatives. I want to throw a good party for her. Nala nodded and agreed. During the whole birthday party, Nala quietly huddled in the corner, sipping the juice in her hand. She watched helplessly as Icarus held Eris's arm and blocked one glass of wine after another for her. Occasionally, she also heard some gossip from the noisy voices. TSK. Who doesn't know that our Icarus originally liked Miss Eris? It was Nala who forced herself on him. Now it's good. Icarus doesn't even look at her. She thought she was something. I think she's been dressed up very flamboyantly recently. Nala silently hid aside and listened to everything quietly. She didn't want to argue. And she knew that arguing wouldn't be of any use. No one would believe her. While she was in a daze, Eris swayed over from a distance. Hey. It's so boring to drink alone like this. Let's play a game. Let's see who Icarus cares about more. Eris curled her lips. And her face was full of pride. It was as if she was sure that she would win even before the game started. Boring. Nala shook her head and was about to leave. Unexpectedly, Eris grabbed her wrist and pretended to fall into the river with the force. At that moment, Nala's mind went blank, and before she could react, she saw Eris splashing in the water. She still hadn't come to her senses. Then came a slap from Icarus, and Nala's right cheek immediately felt burning. How many times have I told you? Stop causing trouble for Eris. I thought you had changed your ways that day. But I didn't expect that you're still so useless. She saw a trace of scarlet in Icarus's eyes, and saw how hurried he was when he ran towards Eris. In any case, it was in sharp contrast to the hysterical roar he had directed at her. But was she really such a person in his eyes? Icarus. This time it really wasn't me. Do you think I'll believe you? A wave of anger swept over her. And she shivered. Icarus was terrifying when he was angry, exuding an indescribable majesty. She didn't know whether it was grievance or heartache, but tears welled up in her eyes. Words came to her lips and then subsided, and then came up again. But in the end, she didn't say anything. The next second, she felt a void in her body and realized that she had been pushed in. The person who pushed her was none other than Icarus. In an instant, the chill of the river water enveloped her. And she desperately splashed and cried for help. Save me. Save me. But Icarus on the shore looked indifferent and coldly shouted. Don't anyone save her. She brought this upon herself. At that moment, a trace of relief flashed in Nala's eyes. But Icarus, do you remember that I'm afraid of water? She said to herself in a self-abusive way. I'm going to be drowned. The afterglow of the setting sun spilled over his face. Nala struggled desperately. Just before losing consciousness, she heard Elias shout, Icarus, heading zur Feldbeidsession. Do you want to kill Sister Nala? She bullied Eris. If I don't teach her a lesson, she won't give up easily. He was still the same, with cold eyes and brows. When he looked at her, there was not a trace of warmth. When she woke up again, Ally was sitting by the sickbed, looking at her with a face full of distress. Sister, you've finally woken up. You've been in a coma for a day and had a fever of 38 degrees. I was so worried about you. Sister, I'm sorry. I was scared at that time and couldn't save you earlier. Nala shook her head and her gaze landed on the empty room. She forced a smile and patted Ally on the shoulder. Ally, having fulfilled my idsai. I'm fine. Her husband, who had accompanied her for so many years, had fallen in love with someone else. Who else could she expect anything from? Until it was dark, Icarus didn't come to see her even once. Sensing Nala's gaze, Ally lowered her head with tears in her eyes. She truly felt sorry for Sister Nala. Sister, you're still young and you can still make good choices. You can't stick to a bad relationship. If I hadn't saved you, you might have really died in the river. He only has eyes for that Eris. Sister, you can't keep making the same mistakes. During all this time you were sick. He didn't come to see you even once and instead accompanied that Eris wholeheartedly. Nala nodded and gently wiped the tears from Ally's face. Ally was right. She shouldn't stick to a bad relationship and she couldn't waste her time in vain. She had to speed up the connection work for the volunteer teaching and leave here as soon as possible. After taking the medicine, Nala curled up under the quilt and went to bed early. Throughout the night, she had many dreams. In the dream, Icarus held her face in his hands that year and proposed to her. His eyes were filled with doting light, and even the tips of his eyebrows were tinged with a smile. Will you marry me, Miwa? I will take care of you and love you for the rest of my life. She nodded with a smile, happily put her arms around his neck, and kissed him deeply. When one dream ended, she dreamed of the year when she accidentally drowned. Icarus risked his life to save her from the water and promised her with red eyes. Nala, as long as I'm here, I won't let you encounter such danger again in this life. His gaze was sincere and passionate. Nala believed him easily and didn't expect that she would end up in such a sorry state in love. When she woke up again, the morning sun was rising outside the window. Nala got up and dialed the phone. Director Yang. I have sent you my file information. I can set off within 3 days. She was still missing one last thing. The divorce agreement. Before leaving, she had to pack up her things. Nala walked to the desk and looked at the photo on the desk quietly. It was taken on their first date. In the photo, she was wearing a white floral dress and holding tightly onto Icarus's arm. The spring breeze blew through the ends of her hair, and she smiled with hope in her eyes. She picked up the photo and took it out of the protective cover. When she first got it back, she cherished it so much that she spent a month's salary sending someone to make a cover for it and looked at it over and over again. Now, it seemed that everything in the past was so ridiculous. She pulled out the photo and tore it into pieces in just a few strokes. The pieces scattered on the ground, just like their love, which could never be put back together. Nala then walked to the bed and took out a red handkerchief from the bed cavity. Inside it were the letters they had writ and during their passionate love affair. She took out the knitted pendant he gave her at the bedside, the red hair dye he gave her, and all the memories between them. Nala lit a fire and threw them all into the fire to be burned. Zhu Li, Eli, the teacher who came for the connection work, saw this scene and quickly ran in. What are you doing, Nila? Why are you burning all these things? Anyway, having fulfilled my obsession. They are all memories. Won't you regret it? Nala shook her head with a determined expression. No. I won't regret it. Watching the flames mercilessly engulf them, Nala let out a relieved sigh and solemnly took the connection documents. Lily, I hope you can keep my departure a secret. I want to leave quietly before I go. After all the work connection was completed. Nala instructed. She didn't want others to know that she was leaving. She wanted to leave quietly and led the remaining days well. Zuli hesitated for a moment. As if thinking of something. She asked, Sister, aren't you going to tell Icarus? Will he agree to your leaving? Nala patted Zuli on the shoulder and smiled. No need. I have my own plans. Hearing what Nala said, Zuli didn't ask any more questions. She always felt that the relationship between the two of them was a bit delicate. The other day when she was on duty in the kitchen, she saw with her own eyes that Icarus boiled the medicine over and over again, and then poured it all out when he reached the door. Finally, having fulfilled my obsession, the superior made a bowl of wontons with his own hands and gave it to her, asking her to give it to Nala. He also specifically told her not to tell Nala that he made it. Zuli was usually too lazy to gossip, so she didn't ask any further. At 8 o'clock in the evening, Nala came to Icarus's office. Icarus, I need to talk to you about something. Don don don. Come in. Nala pushed the door open. Icarus, sitting on the chair, had his brows furrowed. Under the dim light, half of his face was hidden in the shadows. He held a cigarette in one hand, and the light of the cigarette flickered on and off. When he saw her come in, Icarus stopped what he was doing but still didn't look up. What is it? I've said that I won't be going back recently. You don't have to bring me food either. I've already eaten. His voice was cold. Nala didn't respond. She pushed the divorce agreement in her hand towards him. I think, Icarus, we don't have to continue this anymore. After preparing for so long. When she said these words to him face to face, her heart still ached uncontrollably. It was a dense pain, like an embroidered needle with a thread. Sign this divorce agreement, and I won't pester you anymore. You can be with Eris without worry. When he heard Eris's name, Icarus's furrowed brows deepened again. He looked up with a face full of incomprehension. Nala, what do you mean? I've already made it clear to you that there's nothing between me and Eris. How long are you going to keep making a fuss? In the past, when you mentioned divorce, I coaxed you. Now you're so suspicious all day long. Aren't you annoying? Innocent? Nala let out a cold laugh. Innocent? Then where did the red mark on Eris's neck come from? Innocent? The two of them lived together every night. Innocent? Would he push her into the cold water with his own hands for her? What a nice word. Innocent. Nala looked up and met his deep eyes. His eyes were bottomless. But she could no longer see even a trace of love. All she could see was impatience and coldness. Why should she suffer in a marriage without love? She sat up straight and looked at him firmly. Icarus, having fulfilled my obsession. I'm not joking this time. And I'm not being unreasonable. Fine. Since you want a divorce so much, don't come and beg me in the future if you have the guts. Icarus took the divorce agreement, and the tip of the pen scraped across the paper, making a sharp sound. With a snap, Icarus threw the divorce agreement onto her head. Get out. Nala winced in pain, reached out to pick up the divorce agreement, and left the team office without looking back. That night, she fell asleep quickly. Lying on the bed, she felt relaxed and soon fell into a dream. In a daze, she was woken up by the sound of the door opening. After Nala left, Icarus got drunk alone in the office. Somehow, every time he thought of Nala's divorce agreement, he felt extremely irritable. She had also talked about breaking up with him before, but over the years, she had never mentioned divorce. He was afraid that Nala was serious this time. On the other hand, he thought it was impossible. She loved him so much. How could she be willing to leave him? These two questions haunted him all night. It was only when the alcohol took effect that he got up and left, planning to go back and sleep with Nala that day. Under the influence of alcohol, Icarus stumbled and pushed the door open. Nala was a light sleeper. When she heard the sound outside the door, she let out a grunt. It was this grunt that Icarus heard. He followed the sound into the room. As soon as Nala opened her eyes, she smelled the strong smell of alcohol. When she saw clearly who it was Icarus. Before she could react, she was hugged tightly. Icarus had a lot of strength. And he was muttering something. "Don't leave me. Okay? Don't leave me." She felt the hot breath of the person in front of her. And the soft flesh around her waist was gently pinched. Icarus, having so felled by a sigh. "Get out of the way." She tried to push him away. But the strength difference between men and women was too great. Before she could exert any force, she was pulled into his broad and hot chest. Icarus's big hand moved downwards. And his rough fingers made her shiver. Nala struggled. "Icarus. Let me go." "No, no. I won't let go. Can you please not leave me?" In the dark. His eyes were bloodshot, full of stubbornness. Leaning against her neck, he sobbed softly. But the next second, Nala heard him add another word. "Eris." Oh, so he was calling Eris. Nala smiled self-deprecatingly. When she woke up the next day, Nala was alone in the room again. Icarus had already left. Ally came in to say goodbye to her, pouting with a look of dissatisfaction. "Sister Nala. It's a good thing you're leaving. It's been so many days. And that Eris still keeps saying her arm hurts. The superior went to her place before dawn. If you had stayed here, you would have had to endure so much grievance." Ally was indignant and reached out to take Nala's luggage. Anyway, this day had finally come. Thinking about what happened last night and the fact that he had called Eris's name while leaning against her neck, the last bit of reluctance in Nala's heart vanished completely. When they arrived at the train station, Nala waved goodbye to Ally. Ally had tears on her face. "Sister. You must take care of yourself. Remember to write to me often." "I will always remember your kindness." Nala nodded heavily and smiled. "I will definitely." During all these years in the compound for family members, Ally had always been very kind to her. When leaving this time, Ally was the one she was most reluctant to part with. But it was okay. They were all moving towards a better life. The sweet voice of the train conductor sounded. The train officially started moving. Nala looked out of the window at the sea of clouds and took a deep breath. It's all over. Goodbye, Jingbi. Goodbye, Icarus. In the Jingbi health compound, Eris played with the pink handkerchief in her hand triumphantly. She was filled with joy in her heart. That morning, she had heard that Nala had left by car. Without her, Icarus would belong to her alone. Icarus entered the room and handed the bowl of rice porridge in his hand to Eris. He had a displeased look on his face. "Your arm has almost healed. If you pretend to be sick when you're not in the future, I won't be lenient with you. I'm sorry that Nala hurt you, but I've taken care of you for so many days. Don't cause trouble for Nala anymore in the future. She's just a bit jealous sometimes. But she doesn't have a bad heart." Eris looked at him in disbelief and unwillingly grabbed Icarus's hand. "Icarus. Don't you love me anymore? We were so in love before. Why has everything changed just because she came? I'm not willing to accept this. You once said that you would love me for a lifetime. I'm not faking my illness. I just want you to stay with me more." Eris leaned against him as she used to, but was mercilessly pushed away. Icarus calmly withdrew his hand, and his expression remained unchanged. Yes, having fulfilled my obsession. He had liked Eris very much when he was young. She was his first love. And indeed, his first love. But she still couldn't compare with Nala. There were regrets and misunderstandings between them. He had felt sorry about it. But that was all before he met Nala. During these few days, they had spent a considerable amount of time together, which made him realize even more that the person in the depths of his heart was Nala. "What happened between us is in the past. I'm married now. Don't mention the past things anymore." Icarus placed the train ticket on the table. Ignoring Eris's cries that almost broke her throat, he didn't even look back. As soon as he stepped out of the door, he saw Cun to the guy with the crew cut running over breathlessly from a distance. Cun to grabbed Icarus's hand. "Brother. Something happened to sister-in-law. Something really bad happened to her." "What happened?" Icarus roared. His actions flustered. "Tell me quickly." Cun to stammered. "Sister-in-law. Sister-in-law has left." "Left? Where did she go?" "Brother. Don't make things difficult for me. I don't know how to say it. You'd better go back and take a look? Icarus's heart turned cold. Without saying anything, he jumped into the jeep and drove away. On the way, there were people coming and going. Icarus's hand gripping the steering wheel kept shaking. Nala has left. Where did she go? Will she come back? He had so many questions in his heart, not knowing how to ask them or whom to ask. That night, when she stood in front of him and calmly signed the divorce agreement, he had sensed that something was wrong. He never expected that everything would come so quickly. He didn't believe it. Everything was fake. He kept shaking his head desperately. Nala loved him so much. She definitely wouldn't leave. Thinking of this, he couldn't control his heartbeat and quickened his pace. The distance from the team hospital to the family compound was actually quite close, but he felt it was terribly far. All the way, heading for and say. Cun didn't dare to say a word, feeling extremely miserable inside. He knew what the consequences would be if Icarus found out that Nala had left. No one knew better than him how much Icarus loved Nala. Over the years, he had witnessed with his own eyes how Icarus and sister Nala had come along step by step, and he understood it very well. If Nala was missing, Icarus would probably search every corner of the place. If Nala was injured, he would probably make others pay with their lives. Just as the jeep was about to drive into the family compound, Icarus's phone rang again. He answered it impatiently, and Eris's low sobbing came from the other end. Icarus, having fulfilled wide session. My arm really hurts. Can't you come and see me? Your arm hurts? Why don't you say you're dead? The last 3 words stared Cun to beside him so much that he took 2 steps back. He watched as Icarus threw the phone to the ground and then rushed into the room without looking back. Nala. Nala. Icarus's voice echoed in the silent room. However, all that responded to him was a deathly silence. Outside the window, jasmine flowers were in full bloom, filling the air with fragrance. But all this beauty seemed extremely ironic. In the past, whenever this time came, Nala would always run towards him cheerfully, with a bright smile, and take his clothes. Now, there was only emptiness and silence left. He pushed the door open like a madman. And the large room was empty. The places where their group photos used to be hung were now empty. Having been covered for a long time, the colors of those areas were clearly different from the rest of the wall. So obvious. It was as if it was constantly reminding him that the important part of his life was already missing. The sunlight shone through the mottled shadows of the trees outside the window and landed on the table. A thin card, as light as a cicada's wing, lay there quietly, its tranquility making people's hearts palpitate. He picked it up with trembling hands. Carefully. The familiar handwriting was unforgettable. That card carried Nala's last message: Icarus? Over the years, thank you for taking care of me. I'm sorry for all the trouble I've caused. In the future, I wish both you and me well. Nala. The letter she wrote to him was full of distance and respect, without the slightest bit of reluctance or love. Icarus tightly clutched that card and placed it over his heart. His scarlet eyes were filled with madness. With a bang, the table was overturned. The items on it scattered all over the floor. Everyone in the room was so scared that they stood there like sculptures, not daring to breathe. Search. You must find Nala for me. After who knew how long, Icarus finally came to his senses. He sat on the chair, leaning against it, as if all his energy had been drained. His eyes were empty yet persistent. He kept repeating a sentence. Nala, no matter where you go, I will find you. Everyone in the family compound was mobilized. And finally, they found out Nala's whereabouts. But things didn't go as he wished. At 8 o'clock in the evening, Cun woke up the sleeping Icarus. Brother. Sister-in-law has gone back to Xinjiang. She's already on the train now. I'm afraid it's too late for you to catch up now. Xinjiang was more than 3.0 kilometers away from here. How could he go to find her? Moreover, the family compound needed him. How could he leave so easily? Icarus's mind was in a mess. He leaned against the sofa. Memories of the years they had spent together flashed through his mind. At the age of 20, Icarus met Nala. Her sweet smile was like the stars in summer, lighting up his world. At the age of 21, He proposed to Nala and swore to love her for a lifetime. In the dark night, the girl leaned against his chest, breathing peacefully. That was when he knew what happiness felt like. But this year, he had personally sent away the girl he loved the most. He knew what Nala was angry about. But he didn't want to give in. In the days to come, he would have more and more interactions with female comrades. He was stubborn in his heart and didn't want to explain everything clearly every time. He also didn't want to spoil her habit of being jealous. He knew she had been sensitive since childhood. But he didn't expect that she would be so determined to leave this time. Icarus raised his hand and drank the 16th glass of wine of the day in one gulp. The door was suddenly pushed open. And Eris rushed in. Icarus, heading fulfilled my Sasher. Stop drinking. If you keep drinking like this, you'll ruin your health. What's so good about her? Eris snatched the wine glass away and shouted hysterically. I just don't understand. What's so better about her than me? She's not as pretty as me. And her family background is not as good as mine. Moreover, she doesn't love you at all. She's already left. Icarus shook her off, the corner of his mouth twitching into a bitter smile. He was drunk and said, let me go. Nala will be jealous. Nala will be jealous. The next morning, the first ray of dawn struggled to penetrate through the gaps in the curtains. Icarus opened his heavy eyelids. His head felt as if it was being pressed down by a huge stone. And he was in great pain. In a trance. He always felt that everything in the past was like a dream. The dream had ended. But he was left in the darkness. He struggled to wake up, unable to believe all this. Eris pushed the door open and entered, holding a bowl of mung bean soup in her hand. The dark circles under her eyes showed the fact that she hadn't slept all night. She looked haggard. Icarus. Just try a little bit. Please. Icarus turned his head away and firmly refused. I don't need it. Just leave. At that moment, Eris's face turned as pale as paper. As if struck by lightning. Her lips moved feebly. But she didn't say anything. Icarus. We said we would be together for a lifetime before. I thought that as long as she was gone, we could go back to the way we were before. Why won't you even take a sec and look at me now that she's already left? Eris sobbed uncontrollably. And her fragile body trembled. After a long while, Icarus raised his head and asked coldly. His voice was as cold as the water in a pond in the depths of winter. So you forced her to leave, right? So you were the one who jumped into the river that day, weren't you? Eris's hands on both sides clenched tightly. I'm asking you. Is that right? After a while, her eyes were filled with tears. And her voice trembled. Icarus. I admit it was me. But I just love you so much. What's wrong with that? I just want to stay by your side. Is there anything wrong with that? However, her words didn't arouse the slightest bit of sympathy in Icarus. Instead, the sound of a cold and ruthless slap echoed throughout the room. Eris's cheek turned red instantly. Stinging with pain. She struggled to hug Icarus. Before she could say anything, Icarus threw her onto the cold floor with force. The hard marble made her body ache all over. She fell to the ground, her hair in a mess. But it didn't evoke the slightest bit of pity in Icarus. Icarus's eyes were fierce and filled with extreme disgust. If you dare to step in here again, don't blame me for being harsh. He knelt on the ground, grabbed Eris's neck, and squeezed the words out between his teeth. If you dare to touch Nala, I'd rather die than let you get away with it. I'll settle the score with you clearly. Before he finished speaking, Icarus threw Eris out. Xinjiang. Nala got off the train and received a call from Icarus. When she answered it again, her heart was as calm as still water. Is it about the handover of the teaching support work? Icarus held the phone tightly, his whole body shaking nervously. After calling for so many days in a row, the call was finally connected, but he didn't know what to say. He wanted to apologize, to say sorry, and to ask her why she hadn't told him about her grievances. After a long while, he managed to squeeze out a sentence. Nala, can you come back? I'll go to find you. From now on, we'll never be apart again. I swear I'll love you well and will never misunderstand you again. Please come back. He spoke in a hurry. And there was a hint of a sob in Icarus's voice. He was so afraid. In his whole life, he had never been afraid of anything. When his hand was injured by a steel bar, he didn't cry. When he fell heavily from a high wall, he didn't cry. But now, he couldn't stop crying. He wanted to continue speaking, but he was interrupted by Nala. Her voice was calm and gentle, without the slightest bit of hysteria. He knew that she didn't love him anymore. Brother Icarus, let the past be the past. We're both doing well now, aren't we? Wishing you peace and joy for the rest of your life. In the train station, people were coming and going in a hurry. Before she knew it, Nala was already in tears. She pinched her calf hard to stop herself from sobbing out loud. Okay. Wishing you peace for the rest of your life. Hearing him say this, she silently hung up the phone. She got lost in the crowd and slowly walked towards the exit with the flow of people. Everyone was busy with their own things. Some were catching trains. Some were making phone calls. Or some were hugging their long-lost relatives tightly. No one cared about what she had done. And no one knew that just now, she had ended a very meaningful phone call. Thus, Manas, Nala's first love, which she had clung to for 7 years, came to an end. Nala composed herself. And by the time she reached the exit of the station, there were no visible traces of her having cried, except for a slight redness at the corners of her eyes. It made her even more endearing. Nala saw Director Yang waving at her from a distance. She quickened her pace. Nala, you're finally here. Director Yang took Nala's luggage and chattered on. It's cold in Xinjiang these days. You should wear more clothes. You're not used to it and she just came back. If you have any problems, ask Solmat. Nala looked up and only then noticed the person behind Director Yang. Who is he? Director Yang smiled sheepishly. Don't you recognize him? You've met before. Think again. Sensing Nala sizing him up, Solmat immediately straightened his back and smiled. I don't have much of an impression. Hearing her say this, Solmat suddenly wilted and shook his head in disappointment. I told you. She doesn't recognize me anymore. He walked forward dejectedly. Director Yang picked up the conversation. It's Solmat. The year you just graduated, he pestered you to confess his love to you. At that time, you were so eager to go to Jingbi. After you rejected him, he really didn't look for a partner for all these years. Mom, what are you doing? Stop talking. In the sunlight, Solmat's ears suddenly turned red. Okay, having fulfilled my obsession. Okay. I won't say any more. This kid is so silly. If I don't fight for you, a taciturn person. We'll wait until when to. Mom. Director Liang sighed. Nala looked down and laughed out loud when she saw Solmat leading in a huff. She had recognized him just now. The year after the college entrance examination, Solmat stood in front of her house for a full 2 hours just to take a look at her. It's hard to forget someone so stubborn and handsome. It's a pity that she was desperately trying to go to Jingbi to find Icarus that year and didn't pay attention to anything else. Solmat is good-looking, with a pair of beautiful eyes that seemed to be filled with countless stars. When they were at school, she always heard people say so. Unexpectedly, the male god that others had liked for so long liked her. At that time, Nala was also very surprised. Okay. You can take Solmatskar home first. I still need to buy some groceries. You're coming to my place for dinner today. Nala nodded. Things happened suddenly. And she was afraid that her family would worry. So she didn't tell them. Going to Teacher Yang's house for dinner tonight. She also has time to deal with the volunteer teaching work at hand. In the distance, Solmat stood outside the jeep, looking over with his head raised. Mom, having fulfilled my obsession. Hurry up. It's so cold. What do you have to chatter about here? Go ahead. He's afraid you'll catch a cold. Director Yang patted Nala's hand, looking like a gossipy person who had witnessed something interesting. She poked Nala's cheek. Go on. Nala sat in the passenger seat. The smell in the car was very pleasant, with a faint fragrance of cold tea. Although they had some interaction before, they weren't very familiar. Nala tucked her hands into her pockets and casually glanced at Solmat out of the corner of her eye. She didn't take a close look just now. Now, looking at him up close, Nala was so astonished by his appearance that she couldn't speak. He was probably the most handsome person she had ever seen in her life. She looked up at him and was momentarily spellbound. After a while, Solmet turned his head and met Nala's admiring gaze. He instinctively dodged and finally asked casually. Why did you come back? You're that. Where is he? Nala knew who he was asking about. Looking at his cautious appearance, she deliberately teased. Who? Your friend. We broke up. Then will you go back? How long will you stay this time? Will you leave soon? After asking a series of questions in one breath, Solmet scratched his head in embarrassment. Sorry. I'm just a bit curious. Do you want me to go back? Nala turned her head and looked at his ears that were completely red. She found it quite amusing for a moment. I'm not going back. I won't go back in the future. I'll stay in Xinjiang. She looked out the window. Unexpectedly, having fulfilled my obsession. After all these years, she had gone around in circles and returned to the starting point. She felt a bit emotional for a moment. The car swayed all the way. Nala was very sleepy and leaned against the window and fell asleep in a daze. When she woke up again, it was already dark. And she realized that she had slept for a long time, and Solmet was sitting beside her, organizing the materials with both hands. His slender fingers slid slowly over the paper, his eyebrows and eyes lowered, and he looked focused. With the light behind him, Nala could only see his cold silhouette, mysterious and dangerous. Why didn't you wake me up? His eyes flickered slightly, and the corners of his mouth curved into a faint smile. I'm not in a hurry. Anyway, having fulfilled my obsession, I'll let you sleep a little longer. We can leave when you've had enough sleep. He looked very good when he smiled. And she was momentarily lost in thought. In fact, Eris had long known that Icarus no longer loved her. She understood him. He was not good at expressing himself, nor was he good at explaining. She saw the strong love in Icarus's eyes when he looked at Nala. She saw the lonely expression on Icarus's face every time he was harsh on Nala. She had actually known all of this for a long time. But she was unwilling. She was unwilling to let all their years of relationship go to waste. So she framed Nala and forced her to leave, thinking that they could start over. Only now did she realize that all her thoughts were just wishful thinking. She had underestimated Icarus's love for Nala and also underestimated the bond between them. After Nala left, she became the target of everyone's accusation and abuse. Everyone in the compound for family members blamed her for forcing Nala to leave. Those cold gazes mixed with ridicule stabbed at her heart. But she still refused to give up. She endured everyone's disgust and tried every means to stay by Icarus's side. But Icarus didn't want to see her. Whether she went to his office or his home, she, who used to have no trouble getting in, was stopped by others. Comrade Eris, this is not a place for you. Please go back. Don't you still think you're Icarus's first love who he holds dear? Give up. Icarus only has his wife in his heart. Even if his wife has left, it's not someone like you who can take her place casually. I really didn't expect that you have such a vicious heart. You deliberately fell into the water to make sister-in-law suffer. It's you who forced sister-in-law away. Get out. You're not welcome here. Eris's face turned pale instantly. Just separated by a door. Icarus watched coldly. Eris's fingernails dug deeply into her palm, and blood dripped down. Icarus wasn't like this before. He didn't love her, but he wouldn't let her be wronged. But now, she was ostracized by everyone in the compound for family members and bullied because she had lost Icarus's protection. Eris's tongue felt bitter. She had a hunch that she might not be able to stay in the compound for family members anymore. A few days later, she received a dismissal letter from the team. The person who ordered her dismissal was Icarus. The moment she saw the dismissal letter, Eris's fingertips turned white. Just because of Nala, who had already left, couldn't he tolerate her anymore? She didn't want to be dismissed. After a month, Icarus took the initiative to meet her. The moment she saw Icarus, Eris was so excited that her whole body trembled. But the next moment, Icarus's cold voice made her heart die instantly. You were able to join the team as a medical worker because of me in the first place. Now, I can also drive you out of the team. Eris, you know my methods. If you still want to leave with dignity, take the resignation letter and leave honestly. Otherwise, don't blame me for doing something even more ruthless. Hearing these words, Eris's whole body trembled, and the last trace of color faded from her face. It was only when Icarus turned to leave that she made a sound. She asked in a trembling voice. You cannot accept me. But why do you have to drive me away? Is it because of Nala? She has already left and will never come back. Icarus's gaze suddenly turned fierce. Shut up. Nala will definitely come back. If she comes back and sees you, she will be unhappy. Eris collapsed to the ground. Only at this moment did she understand what it meant to reap what one has sown. On the day she left, it rained cats and dogs. Eris carried a suitcase and shivered in the rain. The cold wind swept the rain towards her, and her thin body could hardly stand firm, as if she would be blown down the next moment. If it were in the past, Icarus would have already taken off his coat and covered her shoulders, holding her tightly in his arms. But when their eyes met, the coldness in Icarus's eyes, like unmelting ice, stabbed deeply into Eris's heart. Eris stood in the distance, waving her hand. Icarus. Can't we really start over? Icarus smiled, and his face was full of tenderness when he mentioned Nala. I have a wife. Nala just left out of anger. One day I will bring her back. After Nala left, Icarus's life seemed to lack that kind of color. He stayed in the office every day, leading a life between 2 points. When he was tired, he drank alcohol, and when he woke up, he continued to work. The light of hard work in his eyes that year was gone. Sometimes he smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. There was a photo of him and Nala on his desk. When he was free, he would hold the photo and smile obsessively, and his fingertips would glide across the girl's cheek in the photo. He remembered the years they had spent together. Every time he missed Mila, he would write a letter to her. The letter was very long. He wrote about all sorts of miscellaneous things that had happened in the team these days. For example, Ally had a boyfriend. Ally had fallen for a comrade in the team, and that comrade treated Ally very well. Maybe good news was coming soon. He knew that Nala and Ally had a good relationship, and Ally had always felt sorry for Nala. When Nala fell into the water, it was Ally who saved her. When writing this, Icarus's heart seemed to be gripped by a big hand, and it hurt terribly. He wrote that a large patch of irises planted at home had bloomed. Those were Nala's favorite flowers. After she left, the irises withered overnight. It took him a lot of effort to bring the irises back to life. But the person who left didn't come back. It was said that the flower language of irises was freedom, passion, hadn't so fell websai, and growing freely. Nala was like an iris. She left without hesitation, passionately and freely. She only left behind emptiness and silence after all the excitement. He wrote that the neighbors would occasionally mention Nala's name. They all said that Nala was a very good comrade, and everyone liked Nala. Only he, hadn't fulfilled by obsession, blinded by his own folly, had hurt such a good girl completely. He regretted it deeply. He already knew he was wrong. As long as Nala could come back, he would do anything. So, Nala, won't you come home? When writing this, Icarus burst into tears. Big teardrops soaked through the paper. The suppressed pain burned in his heart, making him feel miserable. After the letter was written, he didn't dare to send it. He knew that Nala didn't want him to disturb her peaceful life. Moreover, even if he sent the letter, he couldn't leave the team to find her. It would only make the deep affection in his letters seem thin and ridiculous. But he still developed the habit of writing letters. He had written hundreds of letters, but not a single one could be sent out. Someone in the team caused trouble and tried to make Icarus forget Nala by bringing a female comrade in front of him. The moment he realized it, Icarus flew into a rage. He severely punished the people in the team. For the next month, the people in the team were terrified when they saw him. Since then, everyone knew that Nala was a taboo that he couldn't mention. Some people also privately said that who was he pretending for with his current appearance? The person was already gone. And only then did he realize that he had treated her badly. The things he had done back then had hurt her heart deeply. Hearing these words, Icarus smiled self-deprecating lie. He got dead drunk. And only when he was drunk could he escape the fact that Nala had left. Until he heard someone say that Nala wouldn't come back again. Icarus broke down and shouted. Nonsense. Her home is here. She will definitely come back home. But when he got home, he could only see an empty house. The girl who used to smile and throw herself into his arms, and who would put her arms around his neck and ask him what he had done that day, was gone. Icarus slumped to the ground dejectedly and let himself fall into a deep sleep. Without Nala, he was like a walking corpse. The chief saw his appearance and sighed. Icarus hadn't fulfilled wide sigh. Let the past be the past. Life has to go on. You know about the matters in the team now. Remember. Don't delay the team's affairs because of your personal feelings. The chief stopped at that. Icarus didn't know what he was thinking. He put Nala's photo into the inner pocket of his clothes and nodded heavily. But in fact, at that moment, he only had one thought. That was, after he finished dealing with these matters, he would go to find his Nala and never be separated from her for the rest of his life. Before she knew it, it was already Nala's first year of work. In this year, she had gained a lot, including friends and happiness. Looking at the smiling faces like flowers under the podium, the corners of Nala's mouth turned up slightly. Children, what did the teacher teach you today? Do you remember it all? The children answered in unison. Remembered. Remembered. Then class is over. The children swarmed around and surrounded Nala, chattering and asking questions. Teacher, you haven't told us the stories outside yet. What's in the outside world? We really want to go out and take a look. Teacher, will we become as amazing as you when we grow up? I also want to build our hometown. Nala smiled, pinched the children's small faces with both hands. Her gaze seemed to travel through the distant years, and she saw herself standing under the podium that year, shaking her head and asking the teacher questions. The little girl's braids swayed, and her eyes were filled with expectations for the future. After a long time, Nala hugged them and nodded heavily. The outside world is very beautiful. You will also succeed. Achieve your dreams. And become the most amazing people in your hearts. Maybe like her. Or maybe like many successful people. They would all reach the mountain peak they had once looked up to and become the ideal version of themselves. Do you just amuse those children every day? Solmat entered the room and happened to see Nala's playful and mischievous appearance. He walked over slowly with a cup of coffee in his hand and flicked Nala affectionately. Hey, having fulfilled my obsession. Do you have any romantic cells? It's true. Don't you think the children will become very amazing in the future? Nala winced in pain, and her small mouth immediately pouted high, like a naughty kitten. In Solmat's eyes, she was incredibly cute. His heart softened a bit. Solmat nodded gently in agreement. Okay. Okay. His voice was like a clear spring, refreshing and with a hint of doting. Of course. Because their teacher is an amazing person. Nala took the coffee and smiled proudly. That's more like it. The children swarmed around again, clapping their hands and cheering. Teacher Solmat likes Teacher Nala. Teacher Solmat likes Teacher Nala. A blush rose on Nala's cheeks, and she pretended to be angry and said, Stop making a fuss. Go back and study. Otherwise, today's homework will be doubled. No, no. Teacher. We won't talk nonsense anymore. There was a chorus of groans in the class. Solmat's eyes tightened. Looking at the little girl on the podium, he couldn't help but smile. He took a step forward and gently took her hand. The moment their fingers intertwined, it was as if an electric current passed through. Nala was in a trance, and her heart was pounding wildly. She let him pull her out of the classroom. Even after they left the teaching building, Nala still hadn't recovered from what had just happened. Her hand was numb, and her whole body felt as if it had been anesthetized. She stared blankly as the person leaned closer. Solmat leaned close to her ear and chuckled softly. The warm breath made her shiver. He spoke in a low voice. His voice elegant and mellow. Seductive yet, making her heart palpitate. Then does Teacher Nala like Teacher Solmat? The setting sun shone crookedly. At that moment, Nala saw a familiar yet strange figure walking step by step from a distance. Her heart seemed to be tightly squeezed. And she immediately pushed away the person in front of her in surprise. Sorry. Icarus was here. The words at breaking up that were late that year hadn't been said face to face. Now they turned into a boomerang and shot towards himself fiercely. Nala took a step back. And her hand involuntarily tightened. Icarus stepped on the beautiful shadow of the setting sun and stood at the intersection of the light, tilting his head. Nala. Long time no see. How are you? He stretched out his hand tremblingly. And tears welled up in his eyes. The girl he had been thinking about day and night was right in front of him. At this moment, he felt that all the hardships along the way were nothing. On the way here by train, following the location, he had had many dreams repeatedly. And all of them were about the years he had spent with the girl. Nala nodded. And her eyes were filled with complexity. After so many years. Seeing him again and looking at his face. All the past memories flashed before her eyes like a lantern show. She organized her words. After a long while. She answered softly. I'm fine. Working as a teacher here isn't tiring. Solmat also smiled. Let go of her hand. And left quietly. His voice was still gentle. You two talk. That day. They talked a lot together and walked on that long street again. When they were at school. Nala remembered that she secretly liked him. The way home for them was this street. She would tiptoe carefully and follow behind him step by step. After all these years. Nala still remembered. First love was originally something very unforgettable. Back then. I secretly followed you for 2 years. Nala put her hands in her pockets. Thinking of the past, she still smiled shyly. I was naive back then. I desperately wanted to be with you no matter what. Now that I think about it, I was really annoying. No. I've never thought that way. Icarus reached out to hold her hand. But Nala dodged it just in time. He gave a dry laugh and felt a bit embarrassed. Are you with him? Nala shook her head. But a sweet smile appeared on her lips. No. He's Director Liang's son. In the past few years of my work, he has taken good care of me and accompanied me all the way. He's a very nice person. But we probably don't have any other relationship yet. Nala raised her head. And her eyes were filled with calmness and frankness. Icarus's hand beside him tightened silently. After a long time, he stammered and asked. Then do you like him? Icarus was also a man. He knew very well that the way Solmat looked at Nala was not simple. Those eyes were filled with passionate love and possessiveness. Just like the way he used to look at her. He couldn't be just a friend to her. Icarus. This is my own business. Isn't it? Nala smiled and teased. Her eyes falling on the layers of clouds in the distance. She took a deep breath. Why? You never liked tasking these things before. Why are you being so nosy recently? Yes. Why was he being so nosy? They were divorced. What happened to her was her own business. He had no right and no qualification to ask any more. But he couldn't help it. He wanted to fight for it. He didn't want to let her go like this. Nala, is there really no possibility for us anymore? I back then. Can you listen to me? Nala nodded. Go ahead. I didn't like Eris back then. And I definitely didn't cheat. I never thought of divorcing you. I admit that we had a lot of regrets and misunderstandings in the past. But I like you. I never thought of divorcing you and being with Eris. I took care of her that year just because she came to help us with the cooking affairs and got injured. I felt guilty. So Nala turned her head. After a long time, she forced a smile with all her might. The pain of those days and nights in the past, she could never forget in her lifetime. When she was a child, she was afraid of water. After that incident, the shadows of those days and nights had always lingered in her heart. She was afraid to swim and even afraid to get close to the river. She choked up and uncovered the terrifying scar in her heart with her own hands. Icarus. Have you ever tried struggling on the verge of death? I have. She continued. And a part of her heart ached excruciatingly. Have you ever tried the feeling of being abandoned and feeling disheartened? I have. Icarus. From the moment you pushed me into the water with your own hands that year, there was no possibility for us anymore. You know me. I've always been clear about love and hate. Once I decide to give up, I will never look back. Nala's love could be passionate, and it could also end quickly. Just as she could give up all her dreams and stand with him regardless of anything when she loved him that year. Now, facing his overtures, she could also push him away decently. Facing the sunlight, Icarus couldn't see the emotions in her eyes clearly. He only heard her ask him, "Don't you think it's too late to apologize now?" It was all too late. Their story had ended. His apology was forever late. Icarus watched with his own eyes as she disappeared at the end of the setting sun. That small figure was full of determination. By the light of the sun, he put his trembling hand on her shadow, rubbed it gently, and his eyes were filled with sadness. After dealing with the remaining matter that had been left untouched for so many years, Nala felt an unprecedented sense of ease in her heart. She bounced back to the office. As soon as she entered the door, she saw Solmat sitting at his desk, looking as if he had no bones. He looked a bit tired, but he still insisted on doing it himself. His slender fingers tightly grasped the pen, making strokes one by one. Unconsciously, the corners of her lips turned up. Could it be that he was helping her grade the homework? It just so happened that there were still so many assignments that hadn't been graded. He was really thoughtful. Did she not need to grade the homework today? She happily leaned over. But when she walked behind him, her breath suddenly caught. He was drawing a little pig. There was actually a dull little pig drawn prominently on the exercise book. "What are you doing? This is a student's exercise book, and you're drawing a little pig on it. How am I supposed to explain this?" Solmat didn't stop his strokes. He proudly added more strokes to it and secretly glanced at Nala out of the corner of his eye. "You went to see your lover. And I'm not allowed to draw a little pig as someone who doesn't know where I stand?" Nala couldn't help laughing. She tugged at his sleeve and rolled her eyes. "Solmat. He's just my superior." "Really?" When he heard this, Solmat's eyes brightened a bit. But a few seconds later, the light faded again. "No way. You were so cheerful when you ran back just now. It's obvious that you weren't talking about work." Nala took the pen, covered the little pig on the paper, poked his chest with her finger, and patted her little mouth, poking him now and then. "Hey! You're not even allowing me to be happy. Why would I tease you? I said he's my superior. I don't know why you're being so jealous for no reason." The next second, her fingers were wrapped around one by one. The warmth from his palm made her heart skip a beat. Nala turned around, and the two of them were eye to eye. Very close. Solmat Sadam's apple moved subtly, and he took in the blush on the girl's face. "I haven't eaten yet. Let's have a meal first." Hearing the girl's jumbled words, he couldn't help laughing. He held back the fleeing Nala and pulled her into his arms. Nala was slightly stunned, and even her eyelashes trembled slightly. She watched helplessly as the person in front of her approached step by step until their noses touched slightly. But he leaned sideways and picked up a pen on the ground, chuckling softly in his throat. A trace of an unknown sense of satisfaction flashed in his eyes. "Why are you closing your eyes? Don't you think I'm going to kiss you?" Nala stamped her foot, feeling annoyed and ashamed. "I didn't. Are you crazy?" But when she turned around, she tripped over a chair. She just crashed into someone's warm chest. He held her in his arms, and his Adam's apple rolled subtly. The next second, her breath was taken away. Solmat's voice was hoarse, desperately suppressing the fire of desire in his eyes. His gaze was stubborn, with a hint of pleading. His fingers kept teasing her. "I'm sick. Lovesick. I miss you so much every day. So, can you please look at me?" On Nala's 24th birthday, Solmat officially confessed his love to her. He had prepared for many days. But now when he said these words, he was still terribly nervous. He stood outside the school, wearing a black suit, with slightly parted broken bangs, and a pair of gold-rimmed glasses perched high on his nose. His eyes searched for Nala. When he saw the girl bouncing out from inside, there was a hint of a smile on his brows. "First of all, happy birthday to you." Nala took the bouquet of flowers from his hand. The breeze blew, and the fragrance of the flowers filled the air. She looked up, her eyes shining brightly at him, full of joy. How did you know that my favorite flowers are irises? The language of flowers of irises is. She likes freedom, passion, and growing freely. Solmet coughed. The usual carefree look was completely gone. And his expression was serious. Secondly, I like you. I've liked you for a full 10 years. I started liking you when I didn't know anything at all. During these days, I've thought a lot. I'm afraid that I can't give you the future you want. And I'm also afraid of holding back your dreams. So, in the year since you came, I've been desperately learning how to love you and growing as hard as I can. You like soldiers. So I'll become one too. You're afraid of water. And I can teach you how to swim. You're afraid of losing and being betrayed. I swear that I will only love you for the rest of my life. Solmet took out the application form for joining the team and a thick stack of envelopes from his pocket. This contains all my savings over the years and my application for joining the team. I know you can't accept me now. But this time, I'm serious. Before he could finish, Nala pounced on him and wrapped her arms around his neck. She was crying and laughing at the same time. Are you stupid? Who told you that I like people who join the team? If you leave, when will you come back? Solmet raised his hand and hugged the person in his arms. The corners of his lips raised, smiling freely and flamboyantly. I thought you liked it. So I wanted to learn. No one said that family members can't be brought along when joining the team. Right? After Eris left the team that year, she looked for many jobs. When she went to find Icarus regardless of everything, hoping to save that long-standing relationship, she didn't expect the ending to be like this either. She thought that if she took a desperate gamble, everything would work out. But after coming back, she lost her original job position. And she had no choice but to move around among various small commercial stalls. Sometimes she sold newspapers. And sometimes she sold pastries. Although she didn't make much money, she could at least make a living. The days passed, with winter giving way to spring and the years changing. Eris never thought that her life would be so dull and boring. That year, she followed a rich man and gave up her studies. She dumped Icarus. But later, she was also dumped by the rich man. She couldn't compare to the life of the rich. Her family wasn't very poor, but in the face of absolute wealth, she still couldn't hold her head up. She remembered that year when Icarus knelt down and begged her not to break up. After being dumped, she resolutely set foot on the path of joining the team. She thought she could make up for everything and make him fall in love with her again. But no matter how she personally gave him medicine or stood in front of him wearing revealing clothes, he remained indifferent. His eyes were terrifyingly cold. I don't love you anymore. Stop doing such disgusting things. Until that night when Icarus was drunk and mistook her for someone else, hugging her and asking for more again and again. But all night long, he kept calling Nala's name. She became jealous. She wanted to ask why. Why was it that just because she was a little late, Icarus, having fulfilled Sasho, who used to love her so much, fell in love with someone else? After all these years, she finally let it go. It was her fault. Anyway, having fulfilled my obsession, Nala was innocent. On this day, having fulfilled my obsession, it was drizzling. She stood in front of the door and watched helplessly as the newspaper was washed away by the rain. That sense of powerlessness. It reminded her of Nala desperately calling for help on the shore. That year, it was she who held Icarus back with her own hands and didn't let him save Miwa. As a girl herself, she also saw the light in Nala's eyes go out. She picked up her phone and dialed Nala's number. After many beeps on the other end, the call was answered. She thought for a long time and squeezed out a sentence. Nala, I'm sorry for what happened that year. When Nala received the call, the two of them were busy preparing things for going to the team. Feeling extremely busy. Seeing the unfamiliar phone number, Nala paused for a moment but still answered it. A familiar voice came from the other end of the phone. Nala thought for a long time but still couldn't figure out who it was. So she just asked vaguely. Who are you? What are you sorry for? Eris. When she heard this name again, Nala's palm turned cold. But she quickly returned to normal. It seemed that she didn't expect Eris to still remember her after such a long time. She left so quickly that year. She thought that Icarus and Eris would be able to get together smoothly. It seemed that this call was to come and hold her accountable. Are you looking for Icarus? He's not with me. He came here the other day and has already gone back? After saying that, she also casually teased. Okay. You're keeping such a close eye on him. Is something good coming up soon? Eris burst her lips. Hearing the voice on the other end, she didn't know how to say what she wanted to say for a moment. No. He loves you. After you left, he drove me away. I made this call to say sorry to you. It's okay. It's okay. It's all in the past. Nala smiled. And there was a sense of relief in her smile. She actually understood everything. But she didn't expect to receive this apology now. Nala accepted it and sincerely wished her well. If there's nothing else, I'll hang up. I wish you a happy new year. Wish you happiness every day in the future. The rain slid down the roof and dripped on Eris's face. Eris looked at the soaked newspaper in the distance. She shook her head. She didn't have a future anymore. Maybe there would be no new year for her either. She was diagnosed with advanced gastric cancer. The doctor said she could only live for 3 months. She couldn't wait until the spring festival. She thought about getting treatment. But she didn't have the money. She sold newspapers day in and day out, but she could only just fill her stomach. Everything now was her own doing. If she had studied hard that year, perhaps she would have a good job now. At least, she wouldn't have to live a wandering life. If she hadn't broken up with Icarus that year, perhaps they would have already gotten married. Perhaps everything wouldn't be like this. But at least she finally said that apology. When Solmat heard her answering the phone, he poked his head out from a pile of clothes and asked, "Who was it?" "A friend. There was something that happened before. She wished me a happy new year and apologized to me." Solmat reached out his hand, walked over, and gently took Nala's hand. "Today we're going to say goodbye to Auntie and the others. Pack up and don't delay the process of our departure." After a short farewell, the two of them left Xinjiang and headed for the team in Jingbi. The last time she left Jingbi, she was alone. Now, when she goes back, she already has Solmat. No matter how difficult the road ahead may be, she will also persevere. "You said you want to join the team. Why Jingbi?" Solmat smiled, lowered his head, and tied her scarf properly. He patted her fluffy hat. "I know you've always been thinking about going to Jingbi for further study. But you never had the chance. Teaching as a volunteer in your hometown is your dream. But you also want to become better. Right?" Nala nodded and happily buried her head in his neck. The train rumbled into the bridge tunnel. In the darkness, she saw his deep eyes, filled with nothing but herself. "Then when we come back after finishing our studies this time, we'll stay in our hometown forever and have children. Do you like girls or boys?" "As long as it's you. I like them all." Solmat looked out the window. As the scenery changed, he felt a lot of emotions for a moment. He was going to join the team. On the one hand, it was because Nala liked soldiers, and he wanted to become the tall and admirable person in her heart. On the other hand, it was because his father died in the war that year. Over the years, he had always had some persistence in his heart. He had seen the photo of his father when he joined the team. His father's eyes were always filled with love for the country and its mountains and rivers. When he was a child, he always heard his father say that a man should have the ambition to build the motherland and aim far and wide. Now, he has fulfilled his father's last wish and also satisfied his own desires. Solmat turned around and faced the sweet face of the girl who was sleeping soundly. Nala looked very beautiful when she was asleep. There was a smile on her small face, as if she was dreaming of something happy. He quietly covered her with his coat and curled his lips. The train soon arrived at the team's location. The two of them got off the train with many bags and suitcases. Ally was already waiting for them at the entrance. Seeing them coming, she quickly ran over. "Sister, you're finally back. I've missed you so much." After a while, Ally's gaze fell on Solmat beside Nala. This man was strikingly handsome. "Who is this?" "This is my boyfriend. And also my fiancé." Nala felt a bit shy. She pulled Solmat's hand and hid in his arms. Solmat nodded and giggled. "Nice to meet you." Please take care of us. Ally wasn't shy around strangers. Soon, went out a low sorry. The three of them were chatting animatedly. Not far away, a green Jeep stopped in front of them. The car window was slowly rolled down. Icarus's face appeared. You can take my car. I heard that you were coming. So. Nala turned to look at Soulmate. She didn't care. But she was afraid that he might mind. Soulmate had a faint smile on his face and slightly raised his chin. Let's go. Otherwise. It's cold. If you walk there, you might catch a cold. Icarus's gaze landed on the hands that the two of them were holding. The pang of soreness welled up in his heart. Perhaps that was how Nala felt when she saw him protecting Eris back then. In the end, everything was his own doing. There was a hint of self-mockery in his eyes that was barely noticeable. Ally sat in the passenger seat, while Soulmate and Nala got into the back seat. Soulmate. I want to eat the oranges in the bag. I'm thirsty. Soulmate smiled gently. Okay. He saw Nala pouting and acting sly. I want you to peel them for me. Soulmate was still gentle. Okay. Icarus looked at the loving couple in the rearview mirror. His throat felt dry. And the words he wanted to say got stuck in his heart. In the end, he didn't say anything. He originally wanted to explain to her the reason for his leaving last time, which was that the chief had called him back. He wanted to say that he hadn't abandoned her last time. Nor had he fled the scene. And definitely not given up. But he found that Nala didn't care about any of these things at all. The girl who used to have eyes only for him was now leaning on someone else's shoulder. She was also acting sly. But the person beside her was no longer him. Halfway through the journey, he finally thought of starting a conversation. Will you still be in your previous position when you come back this time? I can help you arrange it. If you want to live in the former family compound, I can also help you strive for it. Icarus's words were sincere. But Nala turned her head. And the smile in her eyes disappeared immediately. She moved her lips. Her voice was gentle but distant. No need. I've already talked to the chief. This time I come back, I won't be teaching anymore. I plan to further my studies at the team school. I'll still go back to Xinjiang in the future. The main reason I'm here this time is to accompany Soulmate. I've already reported the accommodation issue to the chief. We'll be staying in the side courtyard for these few days. Icarus raised his eyebrows. But the side courtyard is remote. Before he could finish speaking, he saw the girl in the rearview mirror, with a shy face, getting into the arms of the person beside her, and said mischievously, "But our Soulmate said that Soulmate is a little warm stove. Men have a higher body temperature. My little husband will warm my bed for me. Do you want to?" Soulmate couldn't help but laugh. He looked up and met Icarus's complicated gaze. Icarus felt a chill in his heart. She had never been like this with him before. In front of him, she had always been serious and had always been that gentle and ladylike. She only acted sly occasionally. He had never seen her so optimistic, cheerful, having fulfilled my obsession, and bright. Soulmate and Duglantid stroked her head and laughed softly. Okay. And you have to reward me. I'll reward you with a little pretty wife. Soulmate was called to the chief's office in the team. Nala had to pull Ally and go back to the side courtyard alone. Icarus got up and walked to the back of the car. Took the luggage out of the car. But didn't let go of it. The chief is looking for him. Let me send you there. It's not heavy either. Otherwise, you girls might not be able to carry it. Nala held Ally's hand and shook her head slightly. She didn't look up at him. Her gaze fell on the back of Soulmate as he walked away in the distance. And she waved her hand. No. My little husband will get jealous. We'd better carry it back ourselves. Since it's not heavy, I can handle these things. She smiled brightly. Icarus saw her like this and didn't force it. He stood aside from a distance. The things were too heavy, making the girl stagger. But she was still smiling. And her face was filled with happiness. He suddenly remembered that when they had just been together, she was also like this. Mischievous and cute. She had endless energy and joy every day. But as time went by, they became like strangers. Life had no fun. And she no longer tried to make him happy. He also felt that it was getting more and more boring. And that relationship became dispensable. So when he took care of Eris that time, he also had his own ulterior motives. He originally thought that by making her jealous and giving her a sense of crisis, she would turn back into the little girl who cared about him as before. Unexpectedly, he failed completely. Now, Nala can't wait to stay as far away from him as possible. That night, the team was in an uproar. Damn, Nemorhound. Is it true or false? You said Nala is backed, and she brought a handsome guy who is 1.8 meters tall? And our officer personally picked the two of them up? It can't be. Would the officer be so idle as to put a green hat on himself? TSK. No, no. Anyway, heading fulfill wide session. I don't believe it. Do you think this person could be hired by Nala with money? What? I don't believe this person can be more handsome than the officer. Ally sat aside and pouted. What do you mean by hired with money? Are you guys bored? This is Sister Nala's own boyfriend. Her fiancé. They're going to get married and go back in the future. The officer can't compare with him at all. This guy is as good looking as a male celebrity. I've never seen someone so good looking. He's been in love with Sister Nala for 10 years. How can the officer compare? The officer has so many female confidants. Sister Nala doesn't deserve him. Ally has a straightforward personality. As soon as she heard them talking about Nala, she couldn't wait to pour out all her anger towards Icarus. She felt disgusted. Although he was her officer, she also disliked and felt disgusted by him. He didn't cherish Sister Nala when she was here. After Sister Nala left, he chased after her like a lackey. Now that Sister Nala has found a good guy, he's jealous and wants to ruin their relationship. What else is he but a nuisance? In the chief's office of the team, there were tears on the chief's weathered face. He firmly grabbed Solmet's hand. He slapped his thigh with a sigh. Similar. Really similar. It's my fault. I couldn't protect your father that year. It has become a knot in my heart for so many years. When I heard that you were coming to the team, I hesitated for a long time. I was afraid that you would be in danger. But I also support you. Solmet. You're a good boy. In the days to come, you have to work harder. Solmet nodded, raised his hand, and saluted, saying nonchalantly, Report. Sir. I will definitely complete the task. As night fell, Solmet walked out of the office. His heart filled with countless thoughts. In the sky, the bright moon hung high. He curled his lips. He will definitely live up to his father's last wish. When everything is settled, they will go back to Xinjiang together. Now, he already has Nala. She is still waiting for him. That night, Icarus brought a quilt to Nala. It's been very cold recently. I'm afraid you'll be cold. So I brought you a quilt. Nala didn't stop reading and said softly. Okay. Thank you. If there's nothing else, you can leave first. After all, there should be proper boundaries between men and women. It's getting late now. Nala. Icarus called softly. I won't give up. His lips pursed into a straight line. You're not married yet. I still have a chance. Right? Nala sneered. She felt extremely helpless in her heart. Now she just thought it was ridiculous. Back then, she loved him so much. But what was the result in the end? And what was her final outcome? Now she doesn't love him anymore. What is he doing now? You rarely acted like that towards me in the past. You didn't act coquettously with me. And you rarely were like that in front of me. You. Nala seemed to have heard something strange and was incredulous. It was he who told her personally that in the team, one should not violate the discipline and should not frolic and play around. And she listened. It was he who told her personally that she didn't need to tell him too much about everything and that she should handle things on her own. It was he who told her personally that he disliked her for being jealous of others and for being talkative. Now he's blaming her? Who do you like more in your heart? Him or me? Icarus stared at Nala, his eyes full of expectation. How he hoped to hear his own name. Nala tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and stood up. Icarus, petting fulfilled wide session. Belated affection is cheaper than grass. Not to mention Solmet now. Even when we were deeply in love, your weight in my heart couldn't compare to half of his now. You can't compare with him at all. Have you heard the answer you like? Are you satisfied? She picked up the book on the table. turned around, and walked into the room. The door closed with a bang. In the main room, Icarus was at a loss. He stood there motionless, and the corners of his eyes were slightly red. After a long time, he left the room shakily. He didn't notice Solmut behind the door either. Solmut had just come back from the chief's office. Unfortunately, he happened to witness this scene. Thinking of the little girl's sharp-tongued appearance, he couldn't help but smile. She usually looked delicate and weak, but unexpectedly, she was so imposing when she retorted. Solmut gently opened the door and handed the Tang Hulu in his hand to her. Before she could come to her senses, a soft body was in his arms. Oh, you didn't come back earlier. I was so scared just now. Don't you know that your own wife was almost taken away? Did you go out to find that little girl? You don't love me anymore. Nala's gaze landed on her pink lips. A hint of danger flashed in her eyes, and she lowered her head and kissed her fiercely. It stamped. You'll be mine for the rest of your life. In the following days, both of them devoted themselves to their work. Nala studied the knowledge for further education seriously, as she wanted to teach this knowledge to the children in her hometown. Solmut, on the other hand, was meticulous and dedicated in the team. He was on duty occasionally and didn't come back often. Nala would look at the photos and count with her fingers when they would get married and when he would return home. In the 2 years, Solmut had achieved numerous remarkable feats in the team and was promoted to a higher position by the chief beyond the normal promotion procedures. He managed all kinds of affairs in the team together with Icarus. The two of them were both outstanding. But fortunately, they didn't have any major conflicts. Until that night. Nala was already half asleep when she heard the door open. She took a closer look and saw that it was Solmut. He was neatly dressed and in a hurry. He planted a kiss on her forehead and stammered. Nala, this mission may be very dangerous. Will there be sacrifices? Solmut lowered his head. He was also very scared. He was afraid that if he went, he would never see her again in his life. This time, they were going to capture a large drug lord gang. The other side had guns, and no one could guarantee that they could come back alive. If I don't come back, you can remarry. You can marry anyone. But don't marry a stingy person. Don't marry someone with a bad temper. And don't let yourself be wronged. At the end, Solmut's voice was already hoarse, and there was an unbearable pain in his heart. I don't want to. I don't want to marry anyone else. I will only marry you. Solmut. If you dare to die, I won't burn paper money for you. I'll let you starve to death underground, and I won't forgive you for 3 lifetimes. Solmut was about to speak again, but he was called away by a phone call once more. He left in a hurry. In the cold and silent night, Nala covered herself with the quilt tightly. In the days after Solmut left, Nala was always absent-minded, and he even appeared in her dreams. Until Ally received a call from the team. Hello, Sister Zhao. We don't have enough manpower here, and there are too many casualties. We may need your support. Nala's eyebrows twitched. Without hesitation, she rushed towards the hospital desperately. It was already the coldest time of winter, and the wind was as biting as a knife, making her face ache from time to time. She didn't care and just ran frantically. When she arrived at the hospital and saw Icarus standing at the door of the emergency room, covered in blood, she fell to the ground at once, and tears streamed down her face desperately. Where is Solmut? In the few seconds that Icarus hesitated, Nala had already misunderstood. Why didn't you take good care of him? You were on the mission together, weren't you? Why? Nala knew that it wasn't Icarus's fault. He couldn't take care of everyone, and there were bound to be casualties when joining the team. But she still couldn't control herself. She was really afraid of losing Solmut. Icarus seemed to realize this too and staggered back a few steps. There was nothing more heartbreaking for him than her blame. Icarus closed his eyes, feeling as if his heart was being cut with a knife. Nila, what are you doing sitting here? Nala was startled and turned around. She saw Solmut with a cast on his right hand, looking at her with a puzzled expression. The tears on her face hadn't been wiped away yet and were still hanging there pitifully. Solmut knew what had happened at a glance and looked at Icarus unhappily. Did you scare her? Icarus finally recovered a little and looked up at Nala. I didn't scare her. She was so worried about you that she didn't even give me a chance to speak. Only then did Solmit get close to her and looked at Nala with a playful smile. Nala. I heard you were very worried about me. And you even cried. What's there to cry about? It's okay. It's okay. Nala didn't want to cry anymore either. Her eyes stayed on Solmit's arm. After looking at it for a while, she suddenly asked, Is your arm really broken? Solmit still wanted to laugh. Nala's face turned completely cold. Full of anger with nowhere to vent, she could only turn her anger towards him. Solmit. If you dare to make fun of your body, then there's nothing left for us to continue. Her eyes were extremely serious. Wiping the tears from the corners of her eyes, she turned around and left. Solmit then realized that something was wrong and quickly ran after her. Good Nala. Good Nala. I was wrong. He shook his arm to prove himself. I'm not injured. I'm perfectly fine. Look. I'm all okay. Bhoo. You don't know how scared I was just now. If you were to die, what would I do? In that instant, big teardrops fell one after another. Nala's voice became unclear, and she looked at Solmit pitifully. She was really scared just now. She was afraid that she wouldn't be able to see Solmit. Afraid that she had come too late. And afraid that they would have no future together. She had finally been brave enough to love again with great difficulty. If Solmit died, she was afraid that she would be in the shadow for the rest of her life. Solmit pulled her into his arms. Looking at the girl's tear-stained face, his heart seemed to twitch. It was his fault. He didn't tell Nala that he was safe the moment he came back. It was his fault that he made her worry. Sorry. It's my fault. I shouldn't have made you worry. Nala looked at his face for a long time before squeezing out a sentence. Can you be more careful? You're a married man now. If you're like this. Wife. Solmit chuckled. Leaned close to her ear. And whispered. Okay. Wife. Let's go home now. Then he picked Nala up with one hand. What are you doing? You're still injured. It's okay. Your husband is strong. Let's go. Let's go home. In the last month, Solmit handled all the matters before leaving and handed over his work. Nala organized what she had learned in a notebook and also prepared gifts for the children. Along the way, having fulfilled Mayad's session, they accompanied each other and went through so many difficulties and obstacles together. Their hearts were already filled with each other. Nala. Pack up. We should go. This time. We're really leaving. Nala nodded and patted her chest. Don't worry. I've packed everything. All that's left is to go back. A month later. At the Beijing Capital International Airport. On the day they left Beijing. The sky was misty and it was drizzling. The chief came to see them off. He hugged Solmit and said. In the past few years we've been together. I've seen that the younger generation is formidable. You, kid, are no worse than your father. You've surpassed him. Nala. Nala came back to her senses and was respectful. Chief. What do you want to say? Nala. I've also seen how hard you've been studying in the team these days. I believe that the children in the Xinjiang region, the flowers of our motherland, will bloom all over our great motherland under your cultivation. With you young people in China, we will surely welcome a new dawn. Before the words were finished, Solmit and Nala stood at attention at the same time and saluted respectfully. Nala will definitely live up to the chief's trust. Solmit will definitely live up to the chief's trust. Among the crowd, Nala also saw Icarus. He was still wearing that black suit and was walking towards them step by step in the sea of people. Following her gaze, Solmit smiled and planted a kiss on the tip of her forehead. Go and say goodbye. Nala ran over, took her hand out of her pocket, waved it, and handed the ring to him. That ring was the birthday gift that Icarus gave her when she was 20 years old. She liked it very much and had always been reluctant to wear it. Now she was returning it to him. Icarus always said that when they got married, he would give her a more beautiful ring. Icarus was stunned and didn't react at first. After a while, he stammered and took the ring. Actually, you don't have to be so clear with me about this. He stared at her. And there seemed to be tears in his eyes. Nala smiled and waved her hand. Icarus, I already have one. Also, I've been fulfilled one session. I wish you a happy new year. Nala paused and smiled calmly. Find a suitable time to get married too. I wish you happiness. Icarus was stunned. Before he could reach out his hand to say goodbye, Nala had already turned around. He watched her back slowly disappear at the end of his sight, until she was lost in the crowd, until he could no longer see her clearly. Their story came to an end. He and her were finally no longer destined for each other. He had thought that in the past few years, he could have won back her heart and made her fall in love with him again. But her departure was like a heavy hammer to his heart. Everything was no longer possible. Nala was going to get married to the soulmate she loved the most. Soulmate had been planning this marriage for a full 5 years. In the team over the years, in his spare time, he would draw sketches on paper, and the image of the girl walking towards him in a wedding dress flashed through his mind. He had fantasized about this dream scene countless times. Now, it had become a reality. His girl stood under the spotlight, her delicate pink cheeks full of joy. Do you want to marry Mr. Soulmate? From now on, will you live with him in a sacred marriage? Whether it's illness or health, poverty or wealth, beauty or loss of beauty, success or failure, will you love him, comfort him, respect him, and protect him? And will you remain faithful to him for the rest of your life? Nala looked up and had a faint smile on her face. I do. Soulmate, however, burst into tears and lay on her neck, unable to hold back. Director Yang sighed under the stage and said in a tone of hating iron for not becoming steel, look at him. Where's his masculinity? Stop crying. You're ruining this happy occasion. The guests under the stage were also cheering. Kiss, web out a low sigh. Kiss. Where did Sister Nala find such a young husband? Kiss, having fulfilled my sigh. Kiss. Seeing that Soulmate didn't respond, Director Yang stood up directly. Soulmate, don't you want to marry your wife? You even make a woman take the initiative to kiss you. Soulmate looked up. He was very good looking. There were tears at the corners of his eyes. Just after crying, when he looked at her, there was always a sense of precarious brokenness in his eyes. After a while, his big hand clasped the back of Nala's head. He kissed her with an aggressive gesture. Nala, damn, what a contrast. In the office of the Beijing team, Icarus tightly held the girl's photo, and a self-deprecating smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. Today, Nala sent wedding candies to the whole team, and he also got to pieces as he wished. This time, she was getting married. The groom wasn't himself. His family called and arranged a new marriage for him. Icarus, cutting fulfilled my obsession. You're not young anymore. Even though you've been thinking about Nala all these years, you should also think about starting a family. I've told the fangirl next door about your situation. Come back and meet her when you have time. Nala is a good girl. But after all, she doesn't like you anymore. You should let it go. Icarus hung up the phone, neither agreeing nor refusing. My mother was right. She no longer likes me. And she certainly doesn't care about me anymore. He stared blankly at the jasmine outside the room. Ever since Nala left, no matter how much effort he put in, he couldn't keep it alive. He remembered when the little girl first planted it. She held his hand, her eyes shining brightly, and said word by word, I give you this jasmine, hoping that you will never leave me. From now on, Icarus, you are not allowed to leave me. As if in that instant, he saw the innocent and lively Nala from that year again. He stretched out his hand blankly, but he caught nothing. In that winter in Jingbi, his girl left and would never come back. She wished him a happy new year, and her eyes were filled with calmness and composure. In the winter of the following year, Icarus was about to leave the team. After Nala left, Icarus couldn't bear to touch anything in her room. When he was free, he would go and take a look. Touching the decorations in the room, he seemed to see Nala again. He also wanted to forget, but everything in Jingbi reminded him that he had lost a girl who once had eyes only for him. He often stared blankly at the shutters, and he was the only one left in the empty room. On this day, Icarus sat on the sofa alone and thought for a long time. Outside the window, The snow was falling heavily, and the car lights downstairs stretched out in a continuous line. It was already the winter of the second year since Nala got married. It felt like a lifetime ago. He suddenly remembered that it had also snowed on this day 7 years ago. Nala stood blankly in the living room. At the moment when he scolded her because of Eris, there was countless confusion in her eyes. After that, he dreamed of the scene of that day countless times. And he made choices again and again in his dreams. He deleted Eris's phone number. Later, Eris didn't come to find him. And they didn't meet in the team. Or when she was first sad because of him. He didn't scold her for being talkative or say that she was jealous. Instead, he would hold her in his arms and comfort her patiently. If that were the case, would there still be a future for them? If that were the case, would she not have married someone else? If that were the case, would they have a home? If that were the case, would they grow old together? But there were no answers to any of these questions. Time couldn't be turned back either. Every time he woke up from the dream, he lay alone in bed. Half of the empty bed was cold. And he listened to the clock on the wall ticking forward again and again. Then he remembered once more. Time was moving forward. His Nala was forever stuck in the past. He had hurt her. So she left. That time, there was no hysterical shouting, nor any angry resentment. It was just an extremely plain sentence. Icarus, everything is in the past. But it was like a sharp blade that stabbed him until he was completely broken. But unfortunately, Icarus didn't manage to get married smoothly in the end. Due to an accident, he eventually had his lung amputated. When Miss Fang, the neighbor, heard about it, she couldn't avoid him fast enough and called off the engagement right away. Because no one would like a cripple. And no one would stay with a cripple for a lifetime. He was destined to be alone in this life. The new year was approaching. Icarus's mother worried herself to death but still couldn't find a good marriage partner for him. Mom, the new year is coming soon. Let our family have a good reunion. I don't want to get married anymore. He rubbed their photo with his fingertips. And the sadness in his eyes was overwhelming. In my life, I've let down too many people and done too many wrong things. I haven't been able to accompany you well. And I couldn't give Mila a home either. In the days to come, I'm just a cripple. He lowered his head and smiled self-deprecatingly. I once thought about committing suicide. But I regretted it. I will go to Padu Temple. From now on, I will pray sincerely for my family and for Nala. At night, the two people who had been busy all day finally lay quietly in bed. Outside the window, there was a crescent moon. Nala thought of the scene at the wedding today and couldn't help but tease Solmit. You're a big man. Why are you so easily moved to tears? Unlike me, having fulfilled my Idsai. A strong woman never sheds tears. His gaze fixed on her cheek. And there was a hint of danger in his eyes. He chuckled and leaned closer to her. His rough fingertips ran across her shoulder blade. Is that so? Our Nala doesn't like to cry? One, it's not clear what means here. So it's kept as it is in the translation. After a long time, he leaned against her neck and murmured in a hoarse voice. We should stay together forever and ever. Outside the window, the moonlight was thick, their shadows on the floor, interlaced up and down. Nala always had a wish. Which was that there would be more joy and less sorrow in this world. The end of the full text.